On today's episode, we're talking about ecosystems, how to map them, understand them, and intentionally leverage them to drive agency growth. We'll break down the different archetypes of strong ecosystem plays, how compounding works inside the right ecosystem, and how to diagnose misalignment.
All right, Wook. So part of this comes from an app we actually built. It's called the Agency Habits Foundation app. So if you go to foundation.agencyhabits.com, you can kind of get like a free positioning audit. And part of our framework that we have on this app is about ecosystems. And so we have over 100 submissions, actually closer to 150 submissions at this point. And yeah, just looking through it, it's been fascinating to kind of see the different types of ecosystems that agencies play in. And so, I think today we should definitely, go into the detail about what we actually mean when we talk about ecosystems. And from there, we can kind of highlight some really, good examples that we found from our app submissions.
Cool. All right. So let's talk about what an ecosystem actually is. So, when we talk about ecosystem in this context, it's really about where in the world your agency is known. So if you think about if there is a kind of community, professional community where your agency name comes up in conversations, if there's a specific network of people that refer you to new engagements, or if there's any other kind of environment or community where your ICP naturally gathers and discusses business.
Yeah. So ecosystem isn't the positioning statement. That's different kind of, it's very different from, what we kind of classically think about as a positioning statement of like, yeah, this is what we do for whom. And this is also not it's not about your service offering. It's really, you got to kind of think beyond that of like, hey, like what are the spaces and the places and, kind of the kind of networks that we play in.
Yeah. And I think, it's about like, who are the people in that space? And we'll go into some examples there, but the people in their space, like what conversations are they happening? Are they having about, your category and then about services that you or your company can provide?
Yeah. So maybe, what are some examples of a weak ecosystem? And then let's kind of like talk about like, what are some of the stronger ones? And we can go into some examples.
Yeah. Some of the weaker ones, if it's too broad, like, oh, we work in tech or we serve startups, like just broad groups and audiences of people without a lot of focus.
Yeah. I mean, the startup one that kills me. And then sometimes it's like, hey, only work with tech startups, but it's like, and I think people, a lot of agencies stop at that and be like, yeah, that's our ecosystem. And so, we talk to VCs, we talk to founders and, kind of stop there. But, I think we're here to kind of make the argument that, hey, you can be more intentional, you can go deeper. So yeah, let's dive in. I mean, like some of the things that we're going to cover obviously is going to go into even more specific things like platforms, professional associations, maybe even kind of, more a depth beyond the platform. So yeah, let's kick it off.
Yeah. So the first is thinking about an infrastructure ecosystem and having depth there. So one of the submissions came from an agency that focuses in a kind of narrow industrial market where they really dove deep and understood what is the vertical and what are kind of the software layers behind it. And then they identified that there are kind of three key ERP systems that dominate the entire industry. So if you think about the industry and how you can really focus on something that all of those qualified buyers use, that's how they kind of narrow down into the ERPs.
Yeah. So and these folks, they actually went pretty deep. They built integrations with those ERPs. They also kind of, had these tools pre-configured for those platforms so that it's like, hey, in this defined space, like we're gonna have kind of things ready to go. And then they in their marketing language and kind of how they go to market, they definitely kind of reference all these different infrastructure layers. And so if you're and this is specifically around manufacturing, so industrial distribution / manufacturing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like if you're in the industry, and you come across this agency, they're already speaking your language, and they're kind of like, oh, like these guys know what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah. And so basically, if you think about the whole ecosystem there, like there are ERP consultants that could refer them into for a particular part of the integration work. There could be other kind of systems integrators and of other kind of platforms that kind of interact with them and can be, referrers. And then the people at the client side, your ICP, you're really aligned with, in this case, software, right? Not just marketing or other services, but really tightly integrated with the key part of their business.
Yeah. And so, when you think about how does this compound over time and what's the value that accrues to this agency for being intentional with their ecosystem, obviously, yeah, the referrals are stronger from those in their ecosystem. The buyers just, are able to make decisions more easily. And yeah, there's like specificity in their delivery because, they've already done these integrations before and, they're able to deliver at a more, efficient way. And so, yeah, their you know, cost of like acquisition, acquiring new clients drops. These deals are of higher quality. And then, yeah, there's this kind of referral loop that starts to happen. So, yeah, you can see once again, there's strength in being very, intentional and really looking at that infrastructure layer. So this is really about, go define your industry, but then go a level or two deeper to kind of understand where you might play.
Yeah, well, let's move on to the next one, and this is around a vertical ecosystem, so especially around regulated industries. So when we talk about verticals, and kind of the regulated industries, some examples could be, cannabis, legal, healthcare, CPG, like areas where there's very specific information and knowledge that you need to operate there. And essentially that the buyer has a very small community where they're operating.
Yeah, I mean, so vertical, obviously, like everyone, I think when you think about ecosystems, I think a lot of folks would be like, oh yeah, like I'm in a, if I'm in a certain vertical, okay, I get it. Like there's like the conferences you go to, or like, there's like people kind of the clients and, where they hang out. And that's true. But I think like, one of the things to ask is being part of that vertical, defensible to some degree. Like, is there a competitive advantage to being in that vertical and why? And this is why I think we tend to see that like the regulated industries are a more powerful vertical ecosystem than not. So you mentioned CPG. There's aspects of CPG where there might be a regulator, but or not. But like
Hmm.
if you're doing stuff for like a beauty brand or let's say like food and beverage where it's there's not much of a kind of regulatory kind of hurdles or just even deeper kind of knowledge necessary, perhaps let's say, and you're just making simple marketing campaigns or websites or whatever it might be. Then it's not as you know defensible. But I think when you're talking something like healthcare, then you're really talking about something where yeah, some of that knowledge really comes to bear, and then from there, yeah, you can be really specific about kind of building the network off of your expertise in navigating the regulated space.
Yeah, I think that's an important area because, especially in these areas, there are aspects of compliance where there are probably other vendors who may focus on, like let's say it's like financial services and there's some security requirements there, or healthcare and privacy with data, and there are third party vendors that help with that compliance, and being aligned with those vendors and having experience there could be a strong referral source for your agency. And yeah, the more that you're involved and deeper with, you mentioned like industry trade groups and communities there, they basically understand that you have this expertise that's really hard to replicate.
Yeah, exactly. And ultimately that expertise translates into trust because yeah, when you're highly regulated and there's and when we say regulated, it often means that hey, there's a you know there's a cost, or there's risk in not kind of being compliant with the regulations, right? And so if you run afoul of privacy laws, if you run afoul of certain kind of regulations around how you might advertise your services, like you can get the government might fine you, or maybe you might get sued or something like that. And so I think it's about being able to show prospective clients that, look, you can trust us because we know we know the space, we know the things that you're gonna have to worry about, and so this is where you get to really separate from the generalists who probably have no idea and then are kind of thinking about it more superficially.
Yeah. And just thinking about, how does this kind of compound over time, going deeper here? We talk, about, yeah, speaking at trade conferences. The more expertise you have, you're not just attending, but you're being the thought expert in front of a larger audience at conferences, or even specific, if there's industry specific media where you can build that credibility that, you really have that experience there. Um, and then, yeah, I mentioned, going deeper with all of these vendors, being, hyper aware of, who are the big players there, and how do you, how can you be the parties that they refer to reduce kind of the risk of implementation? And yeah, ultimately, the more buyers that know that you're a specialist and an expert in this regulated environment will help, help them trust you, help you win the work faster, so your sales cycles should shorten. And then in terms of pricing, the more you're an expert in this specific area, you'll have stronger pricing power, and so that could overall help your margins for delivery.
Yep. Okay, cool. So we talked about the infrastructure layer. We talked about the vertical. Okay, the next one we're calling it the institutional referral ecosystem. And you know institutional ecosystem is when you think about your clients, sometimes you don't you don't access them directly, but sometimes you might get to them through other professionals who influence or control their vendor selection. And so this is an important kind of distinction to make, where let's think about, for example, if you're an agency that's doing like wayfinding design for higher ed, right? Sometimes you're not going to be brought to the table by the higher ed institution, but you're going to be recommended by the architects who are kind of heading that campus project. And so this is all about can you um, you know map that ecosystem to the professional gatekeepers who then influence your ICP. And so, yeah, I mean, there's other examples for or consultants who might recommend agencies to law firms. Right? We talked about ERP implementers who might suggest other partners that kind of familiar with it. Compliance advisors, right? We talked about regulated industries, but these are other gatekeepers that then bring agencies to the clients. And so, yeah, this is where you're it's super interesting. You're like one step removed from your client, but now you really have to develop relationships with these gatekeepers.
Yeah, it's interesting because in some of these cases, you may, your client may be these partners instead of the you know, end client. So, like, if you're your example of the wayfinding agency, your client may be the architecture firm. It may not be, the organization that's building the building. So, really, your relationship and your, ability to gain clients in that space is different than who you may think, and who's the end user, um, of your work.
Yeah. And this is pretty interesting. Just kind of reminds me, back in the day before Barrel, our Shopify agency kind of got focused on ecom. There was a stretch where we were doing a ton of websites for cultural arts institutions, especially like in the dance space. And part of that was because uh, you know, we were brought in by a marketing agency that worked, exclusively with cultural arts institutions, and so they had the trust of countless uh, institutions, and so they made sure that we were included in all the RFPs, and they with their kind of stamp of approval, we won a bunch of deals, and we ended up, I remember that time where we did at least like half a dozen, really well-known dance, organizations, their websites. And so I think this is like a clear case of like, yeah, if this is your ecosystem, it's really important to know the folks who kind of have the ear of your clients.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing that we learned from that experience is the true people who influence the decisions for who to hire was actually the marketing agency who had a close, long-standing relationship, who had very strong reputation in that space with the end client. And our job was to really, build that relationship with the marketing agency, over time and executing and delivering for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way this compounds is pretty obvious. Where it's just like just obviously get that first project in, and it's gonna kind of build that confidence in you. But like, once again, it's just understanding the trust and network beyond just the end client. And so yeah, I think that's super important.
Cool. So yeah, we covered a few kind of areas of ecosystems. I would say there's also the power of call it intersection or overlap with ecosystems. Um, so I think we touch upon a few of them, but if you have a deep kind of credibility in a platform, so like a tech platform or some kind of service platform, but also with a specific vertical, those are you can think of it as like reinforcing communities. Like in the example where we had the kind of ERP within a manufacturing space, that's kind of a example of a kind of a overlap or intersection between kind of two ecosystems. And it really helps you because you are able to get referral loops and partners from two different directions, not just a tech platform, but also vertical peers.
Yeah, I mean, this is we've talked about this multiple times where really the with Barrel, the decision to go beyond just being a Shopify agency and to really double down on CPG, specifically food and bev, also within that, and to kind of that intersection of like commerce for CPG, food and bev has been you know a big unlock because first of all, like when you talk to Shopify, you can be very specific about to them about, hey, we want to be the best at implementing the Shopify commerce solutions for CPG, food and bev clients. So as your sales reps, our partner manager, like whoever, like, hey, just put the word out. That's what we want to focus on, and we have deep expertise. Look at our logos that we've done work there. Look at all the kind of problems that we saw that are specific to that vertical. So there's that part. But then when you go on the other side to the whether it's the marketing leaders or director of e-coms or even the founders at the CPG food and bev level, it's like hey, these are the guys that work with all the cool brands in our space, and they've done their Shopify implementation and they know all the stuff about the Shopify ecosystem. They're also very knowledgeable about Klaviyo or Recharge and other things that are going to be important to us. So let's make sure we talk to these guys as well if we're looking for an agency. And these things start to reinforce each other. So you get other founders or kind of clients that the agency has worked with on the CPG food and bev side saying good things, and then you got Shopify saying good things, and just it starts to kind of create this nice momentum and halo effect that just makes it easier to win new business. And so I think this is like the compounding is really self-evident, and then you're really able to increase lead volume as a result. So I think this is like one of the more powerful things. If you haven't done it, and I think what we'll say this over and over again. It's like it's not that Barrel only does food and bev, especially in the CPG, because there's other aspects of it. They have some like fashion apparel clients. They have some kind of beauty skincare clients, but like just making that choice to be super focused on this particular ecosystem of food and bev has been a big unlock in terms of just the energy and kind of the reach that you get.
Definitely. Cool. So to bring it back to the Foundations app, the Agency Habits Foundation app, there are 100, submissions, and you kind of see like frequent issues that came up. And one of the top things was just misalignment. So it's, what does the agency want versus what is the gap there? So one example is agency wants to move into enterprise clients, but their existing ecosystem is really driven by the founders' network in kind of the startup space. So, they really want to be known in one world, but they really operate and they exist in conversations in another world. And if you think about the gap there, it's not about, at that point, it's not about like messaging, because essentially you're messaging to the wrong audience about something where they're just completely different ecosystems.
Yeah.
Now, just think about, your last 10 clients, where do they come from? Is it from a specific network? Is it conversations from a specific tech platform? Is that kind of where you come from? And then in those conversations, like what was the context where your agency's name first came up? And then versus your, what is your, your stated ICP? Does that match? Where you're saying this, but people found you there? Is there a mismatch there? And then really, are you spending time in those communities and ecosystems where your ideal buyer or ideal ICP existed, or are you spending time in other ones? So I think really just taking a step back and assessing what is your actual ecosystem currently versus where you hope to be.
Yeah, and I'll tell you a quick story where this was just, I remember, a big waste of time back in the day where it was just you and I both went to Columbia, and I thought, oh, let's tap the Columbia network and just try to reach out to as much alumni and just network. I just remember, I mean, I had like maybe 20 plus conversations in a very short time with like different alums, and it was a bit of a waste of time because some of these people worked at like huge corporations, some of them worked at startups, like the industries were just all over the place. And like, sure, they were nice about it because they were like, oh yeah, like, yeah, alumni, whatever. But like, yeah, it fell flat. And I think that energy could have been better spent on, an ecosystem that, just had more alignment with what we were trying to do and where our expertise was at that time. So yeah, it's a big waste.
Yeah. Yeah. I think all of that is like, taking a step back and understanding like, where are people finding you? Where do you exist in conversation? Like, what is your true, your ecosystem where you're operating?
Yeah, and so that goes to kind of the strategy aspect of this ecosystem, and really, there's two key options that any agency should think about taking. Right, it's either so you map your ecosystem and you're like, okay, cool, like I think this is where we should be playing, but
Mm-hmm.
really, it's you got to ask yourself, hey, option one, should we go deeper? Like, should we, okay, now, we have some kind of platform. Maybe it's an intersection. It's a platform plus a vertical. Okay. Like we got some, kind of ideas of like this ecosystem, exists. Now, do we try to, go climb up the partner tier of the, platform, ecosystem? Do we try to, get more, speaking, engagements at the trade shows where, our vertical, ecosystem is and, just what are the things that are maybe to the point of like institutional, like are there other third party kind of consultants that work with our vertical that we can then kind of get into as well? So you kind of have a roadmap for going deeper. There's that. And then, the other kind of, option is to expand it to an adjacent ecosystem. So you might be like, hey, you know what? Maybe our ICP doesn't quite, like these are the ecosystem I thought we are, but then maybe it's actually quite different and we need to kind of expand upon that. And, some of that could be like, you know, we talked about earlier on, like you had this like generic, ecosystem definition of like tech or whatever, right? But,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you kind of wisened up and you narrowed in on like, hey, we work with, you know, we work specifically with like, e-com SaaS companies and we help them with their marketing websites. But maybe maybe that's too narrowly defined and you might be like, oh, you know what, we can kind of expand it to go more to like, hey, maybe we work with data analytics, SaaS companies, and there's some kind of overlap there, but it kind of gives you a little bit more of a extension that you can kind of go into. So yeah, I guess, but once you kind of start to make those decisions, then you can take a step back and be like, hey, where do I need to spend more time? How do I need to get a little bit more familiar with that space? who are the folks that I need to have relationships with? Those are all the things that kind of come into play once you become more intentional and focused.
Yeah, and I think that's the main thing is you have limited bandwidth to focus on things, so it's you can't go into all of the different ecosystems and try to really win there, and just picking and choosing what makes the most sense to get the most depth.
Yep.
So yeah, I guess to kind of recap some of the areas and thinking about ecosystems as a compounding asset. There are a few traits that I kind of want to call out. So the first is first having that clearly named ecosystem, defining it, building a lot of, I'll call it depth or proof assets, like showing that you are able to deliver for that specific ecosystem, and then aligning closely with the ICP within that ecosystem. So in all the ways that we talked about with whether it's community groups, speaking events, partnerships, etc., just really building that alignment with that specific group.
Yeah, and I think just thinking about the benefits of all that, obviously the referrals are compounding, the customer acquisition costs decrease, the deal quality improves, pricing power obviously is a big thing, and then it just you kind of develop a more competitive moat because at the end of the day, one of the most important things as an agency is to be differentiated in some way, and I think this is just starting being intentional with your ecosystem is one step in that direction.
Yeah, I guess that's the closing thought. If somebody in your ICP were to ask their peers for a recommendation today, think about in what community or context would that question be asked, and honestly, would your name come up in that conversation? And that's kind of really the test of, what is your ecosystem, and are you really, a player in that?
Yeah, awesome. All right, so it's a lot of ecosystem talk for one day. So thank you all for joining us. And until next time, we'll see you.
Thanks.